Blakey's tired, wrinkled eyes opened, unhappy to wake so soon. It was a disheartening realization that even nightmares were better than his waking life. He wished for the bed to swallow him whole and hide him in a soft flannel, slightly musty womb from the unbearable truth of reality. I once was a boy. The voice was awake too. Weren't we all? It wasn't always this way. Which way was that? Reality was now a metastasized tumor of immobility. He remembered he was on the run from the FBI. He was no closer to figuring out the puzzle or finding Alice, but he was swiftly sliding toward the permanent expulsion of either death or prison. He tried to stretch out the pain and stiffness from sleep, but his back wound roared in objection and dropped him back to the bed. Alice was rifling through the drawers of a dressing table. When she found a giraffe figure, she pressed the button on the bottom of its base and made it collapse, then come back to life. She announced calmly, "Dad, they are coming." Blakey rose, straightened with a groan, and looked out the window. Who? The last glow of sunset backlit the rows of suburban houses. Cracking the window, he could only hear the crickets and a cold autumn breeze. "They'll be here soon," she said to the greasy tube of lipstick she found. Blakey didn't have the energy yet to be on alert, but couldn't ignore the warning. He left the spare bedroom and paused in the hallway, hearing music and seeing Jonah in his room, reading at his desk. Blakey continued downstairs and made a cursory look around. Going to the front windows, he found no one, no shapes outside, no police or FBI, only a single darkened car parked halfway down the street, opposite Golding's. Susan called to him. "You like leeks, right?" "Leeks?" Blakey walked into the kitchen, finding her in the midst of a complicated dinner. "Oh, hey, I was actually asking Jonah. But you too, you like leeks." She then repeated the question loudly to Jonah upstairs. "Jonah, leeks, yes?" Jonah hollers in response, "What are leeks?" "They're like potatoes." Yeah, sure, whatever," he yelled back. "No, not whatever. You need more than just a few bites of salad, leeks or no." She scoffed as she went from refrigerator to stove. Blakey sat muddled at the kitchen table. It felt like forever since he had been in an active or clean kitchen. "I'll eat whatever," Jonah hollered down to end any further questioning about dinner. That's what he always says, yet all he eats is the pizza. She checked the stove. Blakey stretched again with several pops of his back. "What time is it?" 6. She pointed a knife at the microwave clock. 6? Can't be. Blakey raised an eyebrow. "Can and is. You slept an entire day." She mocked in a motherly way that made Blakey feel immediately at home. The doorbell rang. Blakey immediately was worried. Susan casually explained while chopping up a salad, "That's the pizza. Can you get it?" Blakey obliged, and his suspicion calmed. But he wasn't ready when he opened the door to Vincent's smiling face. "Hello, brother," Vincent said with a wink. He went for him, but Vincent raised a Beaumont Adams-style revolver into Blakey's face and coolly added, "Why, yes, I will come in." Blakey backed up into the living room. Vincent shut the door behind them, blocking Detective Lusk's telephoto camera view from his car down the street. Blakey backed through the family room into the kitchen, hands raised. "Don't you remember me?" Vincent was wearing a trench coat, but Blakey could see bright red uniform pants peeking out the bottom, ending with shiny army boots. Susan was still busy with dinner when Blakey backed into the kitchen table. "How hungry are you?" she asked without turning. "Starving. What are we having?" Vincent answered. Susan turned, saw the gun, and jumped back, knocking her purse to the floor. "Who the hell are you?" "The excellent question." Vincent threw off his overcoat, revealing a complete, brilliant red Victorian Foreign Legion-style uniform. It wasn't a replica nor a cosplay construction. It looked real, but Blakey had no idea what country or period it was from. Vincent posed for Blakey. "Well, how about now?" Susan was infuriated. "Blakey, what is this? Who is that?" Blakey had no recall, but soured because Vincent and the gun were obviously upsetting Susan. Vincent was actually disappointed. "Nothing, really." Blakey's disgust for Vincent was intensifying. "This is the pervert that took the children." Now you know that's not the story, brother." Vincent cocked his head with a condescending twist and pivoted around them to snag a bite of bread. Delicious." "You made the books," Blakey accused him blindly. When hearing books, Susan looked at her purse spilled on the floor and suddenly became worried. "No, I merely handed them out." Vincent added, "I have never been one for crafts." The book. Susan crouched to her purse, turning it out, but only a receipt and a stick of gum fell out. "Where's the book?" Vincent became suspicious of Susan. "What's she doing? Stop that. Get over there with him." She rose to her feet and complied, but pleaded with Blakey. "The book. I had your book in my purse. It's gone." Vincent presented a small glass vial of black liquid as if it were the Holy Grail. He turned it in the light and offered it to Blakey. There was a subtle purple tinge to the gooey contents. He had seen this sludge before. "Arthur, the book is gone. It was in my purse," she repeated. But Blakey wasn't listening. He was transfixed by the vial with a tiny parchment tag. The calligraphy read, "Drink me." Vincent instructed as if it were merely a taste test. "Drink." Blakey asked, "I know this. What is it?" "Drink, then you'll see. Then you and I, brother, can put an end to it, finally and completely." Vincent's face lit up as if he were about to achieve everything. "We'll fix those buggers." Susan was full-on panicking. "Looking glass! The book? Where is it?" Time then slowed as Susan realized where the book was. She grabbed Blakey, who was looking deeply into Vincent's grinning face. He could only see derangement, only feel rage stirring as he thought of Alice. "He'll shoot you before you reach him." Blakey smashed the vial on the floor, causing Vincent to scream and dive for the shattered pieces. "Now's your chance." Blakey grabbed a kitchen knife, ready to bury it in Vincent's head, but ended up facing the gun barrel. Susan grabbed Blakey again, rousing him by the shoulders. "Blakey! The book! Jonah!" Just as Blakey finally heard her, the lights went out with a pronounced pop. Blakey and Vincent instantly knew what was happening. They all heard a groan from Jonah upstairs. Vincent and Blakey both zeroed in on the side of the house when there was a faint scuffling of claws on vinyl siding. Then the basement door, visible from the kitchen, began to creep open, and Blakey and Vincent sprang on it in unison, slamming it back shut with both of their weight. Blakey gave Vincent a look of surprise at his participation. They braced against the opposite wall as the door pushed back with great force. The pressure dented in the drywall. Susan was terrified, not knowing what to do. "Go get Jonah," Blakey instructed, but it was too late. There was a trembling boom from the attic that vibrated through the house. Jonah was lying in bed with looking glass. He put the book down on the bed and took a step towards the hallway, watching the ceiling as something moved towards the drop-down attic door. Downstairs, the kitchen's door to the basement collapsed in two, and the shapes burst through, stomping on Blakey and Vincent. In the dark, glass and wood and drywall seemed to break everywhere. Blakey shouted. Susan screamed. Vincent lit up the living room with a gunshot. Outside, down the street, Detective Lusk was waiting for that cue. He called in on his car police radio, "Shots fired, 3025 Allenby Drive, Detective Lusk on site." He then jumped out of his car and ran towards Susan's house with a shotgun. Inside, on the second floor, Jonah shifted his attention when he heard something coming up the stairs on four limbs. "Mom!" Jonah called out, not wanting to leave the doorway of his room. Weak moonlight from the window at the end of the hall was the only illumination. There was another gunshot downstairs which made him jump. He retreated to the bed corner, seeming to regress in age. "Mom!" A clawed hand of 10-inch-long fingers curled around the door jamb. The shape's head, with its glowing pupils, peered into his room. Jonah's throat went dry and his eyes bulged. He retreated across his bed to the corner. Downstairs, Vincent punctuated the darkness with 2 more shots. 2 shape bodies collapsed, one in the living room and one on the stairs. Blakey was trying to hold a shape back with all his might. One hand kept the mouth closed and his other arm was around its neck in a headlock. It clawed at him ferociously and sliced open Blakey's cheek. He strained harder, tightening the grip on the monster's neck. He hoped that he could finally overpower one of the monsters without using his club. Its clawing slowed. Vincent ended the struggle with a point-blank shot to the shape's head, killing it and spilling its inky brains on the wall. Susan had retrieved Blakey's pistol he had given her at her office, but didn't know what to aim at. Lusk kicked at the door. "Police!" Vincent rushed to reload. Empty cartridges hit the carpet in a drum roll. Blakey managed to get to his feet, rising right into Susan's scream at the sight of 4 shapes descending the stairs with Jonah in their grasp. Vincent swiftly took careful aim and killed one of the 4 shapes. Blakey stayed Vincent's hand. "You'll hit the boy." The 3 remaining shapes and Jonah moved through the living room towards the door. In front of the 2 holding Jonah was the shape with the glow-stick necklace. The sticks were almost completely faded. It hissed at Blakey. Then the front door broke open. Lusk entered with his shotgun raised. This distracted the shapes, and Vincent took his shot. He hit one of the shapes, holding Jonah square in the head, and it collapsed. The 2 others hissed grotesquely at Vincent and reclaimed the boy. In the dark confusion, Lusk could only see Vincent with a gun, aiming it at the boy alone in the corner of the living room. "Drop it!" he barked. Lusk didn't ask a second time and did what he wanted to do all along. He shot Vincent dead. Blakey and Susan gawked as Vincent collapsed onto the rug and twitched once, like a toy with its batteries pulled. Susan stepped forward toward the shapes and Jonah. "No, please." Lusk, satiated, moved from the foyer to the living room to check his kill. "Get up from that, you sick tit." Lusk's smile instantly dropped because Vincent's body dissipated into the shadows. "What the absolute fuck?" Lusk could only point at the spot where Vincent had just been. When Susan screamed, "No, please don't take him!" Lusk turned to see Jonah by himself, no shapes, contorted and floating towards the door. This baffled Lusk more than Vincent's disappearance. What in the hell is going on? Blakey held Susan back, and she dropped the gun to the floor to plead with prayer hands. Lusk stared, mouth agape, at Jonah floating across the foyer. His feet were 6 inches above the floor. Hey, you, need to stay here. This is a crime scene, son." But Jonah glided through the doorway. Lusk stepped towards him, firmly repeating, "I said you need to stay here." When he stepped closer and raised the shotgun to a 2-handed grip, the necklace shape grabbed the weapon and wrenched it from him in one blazing sweep. Lusk was dumbfounded as he watched the shotgun jerk out his hands and then fly across the room. Lusk drew his sidearm and raised it. Then the air jerked him forward by his arm and broke his limb in 2. Lusk screamed and the air grabbed him by the neck, lifting him off his feet. The detective gave Blakey a look of pure, terrified confusion. Lusk's neck then broke, snapping to the side with a jerk. His body flew against the coat closet door before falling to the floor limp. Susan pleaded, begging the shapes, "Please, no, give him back, please." Demons never hear please. They only looked at her with cold malevolence. They backed down the porch. Jonah could barely breathe, so overwhelmed by the monster's hold. Blakey retrieved Vincent's gun from the floor and stood between Susan and the shapes. Give me the kid. You're not taking this one. Blakey aimed the gun and cocked the hammer. The glow necklace shapes stepped forward from their catch. Blakey pulled the trigger and nothing happened. Vincent had managed to only reload 2 rounds. The shape stared at Blakey as he checked the gun and pulled the trigger again. The shape then slashed Blakey, cutting across his chest, through his clothes, through flesh to the bone of his sternum. Blakey looked down at the flap of shirt and skin. Another devastating swipe knocked the gun from his hand and just missed his eye, but opened his cheek. He watched as an arc of his blood spattered onto the old tire swing hanging in the yard. He wobbled and then fell to his knees. The shapes then disappeared down the street with Jonah. Susan ran after them, screaming hysterically, but Blakey couldn't hear her. Everything went silent for Blakey as he bled into the grass, unable to stop the shapes from taking Jonah. Susan's cries of, do something, fell on trauma-muted ears. Blakey looked at the gun nearby on the grass and desperately wished it had one last round. Susan stopped running. They were already gone, too fast to catch. She returned to Blakey and screamed at him, not seeing his injuries. "You get him back, you hear me? You get him back, not my Jonah." Blakey looked up. A long thread of gore dangled from his face to the grass, as if chained to the earth. He stared blankly at her as she sobbed uncontrollably. "Oh, God!" Susan folded to her knees, repeating, "Oh, God!" like a winding down clock to Blakey's face. She begged him out of his trance. "Arthur, please, where are they taking him?" Her cries gained volume in Blakey's dulled ears, and he looked down the street where they had disappeared. Alice waited there, in a streetlight pool of illumination, on the edge of the darkness, staring back at him, waiting for him to do something. "You'll get him back. You can get him back. My poor Jonah. Oh, God, oh, God." She cupped her mouth as if her brains could spill out from the terror. It was a repeat, a folding of a year from Alice to Jonah. The sirens in the distance finally pulled him up. "I'll get him back," he mumbled. She instantly stopped pleading. "You will?" "I promise." The sirens were swarming, circling in, so Blakey moved to leave, staggering to Golding's car. He fumbled in his pocket for his keys on the way. "Wait, I'm coming." She marched ahead of him. "No," Blakey declared. "Yes!" She got in the car before him, and Blakey knew there would be no changing her mind. He winced when he squeezed in behind the wheel. "Let me look." She reached for his face, but Blakey shrugged away. "It's all right," Blakey assured. But she reached again because the flesh around the wound on his face was already blue. The capillaries became visible through the skin. "Leave it!" Blakey started the car and sped off. Susan didn't even know where they were going, but it didn't matter as long as it was to get Jonah back.